Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Hero Movie Podcast, your greatest source for superhero movie discussion in the multiverse. I'm your host, Adam Portrais, and I'm joined by Sean Kovacs.
I'm Sweet Chauncey from the internet.
And, of course, Bruce Leslie.
I'm a prickly pear, and you got your horse in my xenomorph. No, you got your xenomorph in my horse. And that's how Reese's Cups were invented.
Isn't it, though, everybody? When you smash two things together, it makes it all the better. Or does it? We don't know. We're going to be talking about that today in our review of Cowboys and Aliens. Yeah, that was a comic book movie. And
oh, man, I watched Space Cowboys by mistake. I think I got it.
Does the comic book suck as bad as the movie?
I think we'll get into that.
Because the movie sucks. The movie's awful.
Hey, I'm going to say I had never seen this movie before, and I thought here was an opportunity for me to watch something for the first time for the show that wasn't a new release. How about that?
I had seen it, but the good thing about this movie is it sucks so bad you just forget everything about it, and it's like you're watching it new again the second time.
Well, I watched it yesterday, and I will be relying heavily on my notes to remember anything.
It's almost as if, well, we'll get into it. But before we do that, though, we do want to say thank you to everyone who supports us over at patreon.com/HMP. There every single week you get the pre-show, post-show, and, of course, the Dinger Zone, of which we talked a lot about, the Suicide Squad 2. I guess that's going to be the unofficial name. I think it's like Suicide Squad 2, more of the suicide or something like that. I don't know what they're going to call it, but it's probably not going to be just called Suicide Squad again, I don't think.
I hope they just call it Sua Squad.
What was the first one called Suicide Squad or The Suicide Squad?
Ooh, that's a good question.
It's just Suicide Squad, the first one, because the sequel, the working title is The Suicide Squad.
I think they might go with that. I think it might end up being The Suicide Squad. Like, didn't Fast and Furious do that with The Fast and Furious? Yeah.
Fast and Furious has gone so insane with their naming structure to where the poster, the trailer, and the title card in the movie all have different names on at least one of those films. Where
and
everything
the
is
timeline
different.
is insane in most movies.
Yeah, Han is still alive. I don't know how that works.
By the time we get to the 9th Suicide Squad movie, it'll be the same way.
Hey, listen, man, if DC has their way about it, they'll be doing 15 of those a year if it does as well as it probably is going to end up doing, what with James Gunn behind it. But if you'd like to hear more thoughts on that, head on over to patreon.com/HMP and be a part of the show, man. We really appreciate that.
HMP, son.
Love it. Well, let's get into our movie, Cowboys and Aliens, everybody. Before we do Bruce's little bit, I've got a bit here. Here is the fake trailer for Cowboys and Aliens.
What happens when two movie genres are smashed together? You got your aliens and my cowboys.
You got your cowboys and my aliens.
James Bond and Indiana Jones team up in a feature that attempts to make even the vaguest ideas into something that resembles a story. But if not, Olivia Wilde is hot, so Cowboys and Aliens, rated PG-13.
All right, that was the fake trailer for Cowboys and Aliens.
We should have talked before my intro.
Listen, I don't know what you're going to do.
Same bit.
We don't rehearse, everybody. We don't rehearse. But yet, you know what I call that, Bruce? Two great minds thinking alike.
And us thinking alike, too.
Yeah, exactly. I wasn't talking about... That's supposed to be Sean's line. Were you not looking at the script that we've laid out before every single show?
That's not true. I think that Bruce is brilliant.
I blame Tony. Tony messed it up.
Well, you know what time it is.
Damn it, Tony.
Luckily, Tony's here in the studio with me, so I get to punch him if he doesn't hit the cues. What do you got, Bruce? This is a comic book movie?
Weird Westerns. Weird Westerns are a comic subgenre that I've enjoyed for most of my life. And my love for this style can indubitably be traced back to the carefree days of my youth when reruns of the Wild Wild West were being watched on afternoon TV. I spent a lot of time watching Westerns with my grandfather growing up, and I don't think my affection for both sci-fi and fantasy needs any explanation, but when the two were combined, it gave me an interesting flavor that was both satisfying and far from being oversaturated. Now, the relative scarcity of material was almost certainly part of the appeal, and if all you know about the Wild Wild West is the Will Smith movie, put that aside because the show was significantly different. It was produced in the latter half of the 1960s, starred sophisticated manly man Robert Conrad and was described by its own creators as James Bond on a horse. And that phrase, James Bond on horseback, seems more accurate than ever. The combination of a Victorian-era setting and Jules Verne-inspired technology laid down the foundation for things like steampunk and dieselpunk before those terms even existed. But this isn't the TV connection. This is the comic connection. And weird Western comics to mention are aplenty. Most comics in the subgenre break down into two categories. The ones with mystical horror elements like Jonah Hex as he appeared in DC's Weird Western Tales, and the ones with sci-fi elements demonstrated beautifully by Charlton Comics' Space Western comics. The inevitable link between sci-fi and Western comics goes back to the era of pulp magazines. As we well know, pulp magazines had to produce a lot of stories and thus required prolific writers. Two topics that always sold well were Westerns and sci-fi, and writers who liked to eat on a regular basis found themselves writing both kinds of stories. Also, it's fair to assume that many of the same readers overlapped in what they read. Now, in the 1930s, C.L. Moore created one of the first space Western heroes. His name was Northwest Smith. By profession, Smith is an outlaw who lives by a variety of criminal means, including smuggling. Maybe he was a proto-Han Solo if someone were a fan of Flash Gordon-era sci-fi. But many of the planets he visited were inhabited by indigenous peoples very similar to North American natives. Smith is described as a dark-haired man with a space bronze skin and pale eyes who wears brown spacer's leathers and carries a ray gun at his side like an Old West gunfighter. This character had a following, so it was natural other sorts of characters would follow. After superhero comics declined in popularity in the 1940s, Western comics and horror comics replaced them. But when horror comics became untenable with the Comics Code Authority in the mid-1950s, science fiction themes and space westerns grew more popular. It's worthy to note that not everyone was enthusiastic about the idea, though. Particularly unhappy with the new style was a group known as the Turkey City Science Fiction Writers Workshop. They published the Turkey City Lexicon, which condemned the space western as the most pernicious form of pre-established background that avoids the necessity of creating a fresh world. I'd say if you have something as ridiculous as Turkey City in your name, you shouldn't cast stones. I can also picture Arnold telling Willis that he's acting like the mayor of Turkey City because I'm old enough to remember when Turkey was a serious insult. But Turkey City failed to discourage the true believers as stories like Transformers Hearts of Steel, local favorite Winona Earp, and beloved anime Cowboy Bebop would be produced to the joy of multitudes of fans. Another noteworthy example is the 2006 original graphic novel Cowboys and Aliens. Published by HarperCollins, it was written by Fred Van Lente of Marvel Zombies fame and Andrew Foley. The art was by Dennis Calero, whose retro style has also been featured on such excellent licensed comics as Kolchak, the Night Stalker. Did you guys know there was a Kolchak, the Night Stalker comic?
No.
Also, Sliders had its own comic, and the Cisco Kid. Now, the comic looks great, and the story is fun, so it's not much of a surprise that the movie rights were optioned before it was published. Now, I'm going to let you guys in on a little secret. Can you guys keep a secret?
I'll do my best.
The number of dollars to be made from a movie are typically far greater than those to be made from a 100-page one-shot graphic novel. Did you guys know that?
No.
Well, this is where some suggestions of skullduggery come into play. A movie option is just that. A studio has the option to make a movie, but nothing guarantees they will. In order to sway that status from option to development to actual production, the creators of Cowboys and Aliens used some tactics to inflate their sales numbers and perhaps make their comic appear more popular than it really was. The first thing they did was price the 105-page OGN at about the same price as a 22-page single issue. As an advocate for the comic readers, I'll never complain that a book's price is too low, but some fingers have been pointed. They also solicited it in diamond in a way that misled retailers into believing it was issue 1 in an ongoing series, which typically generates more interest than a standalone OGN. And they were accused of using business ties at Top Cow to make the comic appear to be an image title, which it was not. But I honestly don't see what the big deal is there, because it's not like HarperCollins is a small-time publisher. They just don't do a lot with comics. They also gave certain retailers huge bulk discounts on the book, which is a common practice in traditional publishing, but not something you see as often in comics. But based on these inflated numbers, Entertainment Weekly listed Cowboys and Aliens as a top seller for the month, and that prompted Universal DreamWorks to move the project forward. But in the comic, the main character's name is Zeke Johnson, changed to Jake Lonergan in the film for reasons I don't understand. But Zeke is hired to protect a caravan from Apaches as it makes its way to a silver mine. The Apaches attack as expected, but the fight stops abruptly when an alien spaceship crashes nearby. The alien commander, Rado Dar, exterminates some of the Indians and allows Zeke to escape as the aliens set out to conquer Earth. The Cowboys are attacked by aliens riding on flying motorcycles at one point, and they're chased to a cliff where they're rescued by the Apache. The two groups decide to join forces in order to defeat the aliens. Zeke steals a microwave-emitting pistol. A blacksmith uses scraps of the alien motorcycles to forge anti-gravity horseshoes that allow the Indians to ride on flying horses. And you heard that right. The comic had flying horses, the kind of ridiculousness that makes a ridiculous story fun. Commander Dar's assistant, Ray Chok Kai, switches sides, falls in love with Zeke, and then proceeds to give the Cowboys and Indians vital information. They plan an attack, but the Cowboys get captured. The captured humans are set for execution at dawn, but then to save the day, the Indians ride in on their flying horses and defeat the aliens. And that, fellas, is how you have a grand finale for a space western. A bunch of people set to be hanged at dawn or rescued at the moment of their execution by flying horses. And I know that tastes differ by individual, but I think this movie could have used a scene like that.
Oh, man, we could have used all the flying horses. Flying horses? Come on.
They would have had to change the title to Cowboys and Aliens and Flying Horses. So they didn't want to do that.
This is, of course, directed by Jon Favreau from 2011, written by Kurtzman and Orsi, David Lindelof, and Mark Fergus there as well, starring, get this, Daniel Craig, Harrison Ford, Olivia Wilde, who else? Clancy Brown,
Sam
Paul
Rockwell.
Dano, Sam Rockwell, Adam Beach, who actually got mentioned earlier in the Dinger Zone. Everybody go check it out. But yeah, man, this is a fantastic cast. This is a pretty decent crew we got working here. To quote Fred Willard, what happened?
That's what I'm wondering, because I knew that people.
You have two. There's two major problems with this movie, but go ahead, Bruce.
Well, I knew that people didn't like this movie.
Yeah,
but
it
on
sucks.
paper, on paper, I've never seen it before, and when I thought this would be a good one to watch this week, on paper it looked great. You know, I mean, it's a high concept, which I'm usually into. I like high concept movies. Mm-hmm. Directed by Favreau, and this is not too far after Iron Man. Damon Lindelof, you know, he's got some good work on his resume. I love the cast. I saw that it had a big budget, obviously, so I was really expecting there to be some kind of nugget to be enjoyed in all of this, but maybe I was disappointed. I think I was.
It's interesting for me because this was actually my my first time watching it, but my second time attempting it, actually. I remember trying to watch it when it was out on video initially, and I got through the first act just as the town gets attacked for the first time. And after that, I was kind of bored, and I think that happened again this time. I watched the whole thing, obviously, but I think that first act is fairly strong. The guy who, you know, wakes up in the middle of nowhere, doesn't know where he's at, has got this strange thing on his arm that can, you know, wildly kill people and stuff. You have a really interesting story here, and then when we see the actual aliens, for some reason, everything kind of grinds to a halt, and you just don't care anymore.
So you've got the thing. Let's start from the beginning here. So you've got the thing on his wrist, on Daniel Craig's wrist. That is poorly made because it looks like it's plastic. It doesn't look like it's metal.
True.
So immediately you're put off. If it looked more tactile, more real, maybe that would be better. But it looks ridiculous on his wrist, and it looks stupid, especially in a movie where they're trying to show you that they're, you know, like we're back in the old West, like that kind of thing. So that's your first problem. 2, Daniel Craig is completely miscast in this role. He's a very, very good actor, and even his accent, although it does waver from time to time, his accent is pretty good. He doesn't do the thing that most British actors do, which we've talked about before on the show, which is that everything is like super nasally and loud when they're talking. He does not do that thing.
He didn't pull a Liam Neeson doing an American accent.
Yeah. Or Cumberbatch or one of the 15 like British people who speak with the American accent and they just sound like complete dinks. And he doesn't do that, but he's completely miscast in this role. I do not believe for a second that he is a cowboy in the Old West. That is a mistake. You need to have somebody in this role who you actually believe could have lived during that time. I don't think that Daniel Craig is one of those people. So that's another problem you have.
He is grizzled looking. I think that's about as much as you can get.
Sure, but do you honestly believe that guy was? Do you for a second think that guy's a cowboy?
Not really. I think a lot of it also has to do with the hat. I don't know if I like the hat.
It's Daniel Craig.
It's Daniel Craig, too.
It's Daniel Craig from Get Up Go. If
Now,
it's somebody we don't know, it would have been a lot better.
Do you know who? Did you guys hear about, see who it was Daniel Craig replaced in that role?
Well, there's a bunch of different people that he replaced because they've been shooting people around for this movie. This movie's been in development since the mid-90s.
Well, I guess we can get into it more, but there was the strongest before they got to Craig was Robert Downey Jr.
Right.
And that's how Favreau got attached to the film, was because this was going to be an RDJ joint. And then Favreau stuck around when RDJ went to make the Sherlock Holmes movie.
A better move.
Yeah. And the original director, according to what I read, was a guy named Steve Odekirk. Are you guys familiar with him at all?
Yeah,
and
he's Kung Pao into the fist.
The best thing, and you know what? Well, we'll get back to it. But this movie needed to be a little bit more campy, I think. I think Spielberg's was a little too involved with it. Hurt this film because he didn't direct it. You know, might have been different if he was actually directing it. But Steve Odekirk left this project to pursue a remake of The Incredible Mr. Limpet.
Right.
Which I kind of want to see that.
Well, it's more his speed also. I mean, that is who that guy is. He came up with Jim Carrey with he helped Jim Carrey rewrite Ace Ventura, Pet Detective.
And you know, with a name like Cowboys and Aliens, I wouldn't mind a director who understands, man, this premise is kind of goofy, kind of ridiculous. Let's lean into it. But instead, we got somebody who was obsessed with by his own admission, his goal was to give us both a Sergio Leone Western and an Aliens movie, like, you know, Ridley Scott version of an Aliens movie.
Isn't the source material more like tongue in cheek and funny than this piece of crap?
Yeah, the source material is, you look at the title and you get what you expect. You know what I mean? It's pulpy. I don't know that it's necessarily funny.
It's more Mars Attacks than this.
Yeah, I mean, I would just say it's pulpy. People understand, hey, this is like from a bygone era. This is something you don't see much anymore, and we're just going to kind of revisit that because you know the pulpy stuff. It's like more campy than straight up humor, but the pulpy stuff wasn't always funny on purpose. But when you're a writer and you got to crank out 7 novels a week, you know, some funny stuff slips through whether you want it to be funny or not.
Right. Now, do you want to hear the other people who names were tossed around?
I would love to.
So we've got Jackie Chan.
That would be kind of
for the Daniel Craig role.
I don't know. It doesn't say.
No.
I'm going to guess that it probably is for the Daniel Craig role. Brendan Fraser, Chuck Norris probably as the Harrison Ford character. Kurt Russell again probably is the Harrison Ford character. Mr. T.
I'm down. Anything with Mr. T, I'm in for.
Bruce Willis.
Oh boy. Hey, he would have been able to sit on a horse. Huh?
The directors that were tossed around were, again, Steve Odekirk, Ron Underwood, and Joe Johnston.
Joe Johnston would have been good.
Now, let me tell you what I would have liked. Now, first off, I was behind the Odekirk idea, but Joe Johnston, bringing that, you know, because he had that pulpy retro feel with The Rocketeer, and then you add Brendan Fraser into the movie with a little bit of that mummy vibe that he had.
Yeah,
I think you give me the movie I expected. Like, I expected to see something in tone like The Mummy, and instead I got something that I'm just going to say really doesn't have a tone.
You're right. If Brendan Fraser was in that Daniel Craig role, this movie would be entirely different.
Well, Brendan Fraser, first of all, would be great at this role.
He kind of would, right?
Because he understands that it's supposed to be kind of sort of funny. And Daniel Craig is bringing none of that to this. Now, I don't know if it's because someone, whether it's Favreau, whether it's Spielberg, someone said, this is deadly serious.
Because that's a bummer too, because like we've seen him in several things where Daniel Craig can be quite funny. I mean,
yeah.
Go ahead.
Spielberg is where I'm going to lay the blame, because what I've run across is that Spielberg required Favreau and others to come to his private movie theater at his mansion and watch classic Westerns in his screening room while he provided commentary about what made these classic Westerns work. Because, Favreau did Iron Man. He can have fun with the movie. He can have something that's both ridiculous and serious action at the same time. Favreau could have directed something better than what we got here, but I feel like Spielberg, and come on, if you're a director, Spielberg tells you to do something, you kind of are going to do it, right? I mean, the guy is a legend.
You're a legend.
You're going to play ball so you can keep working.
Yeah.
Well, not only that, even if you're not worried about keeping working, that's just going to be like one of your probably biggest idols ever is telling you how to do something. You're probably going to do it, even if it doesn't work out in the end. And Spielberg, had he directed this, I think it would have probably been a little bit better, or had he kept his hands completely off of it, it would have been a little bit better. But it's why like the best athletes don't always make good coaches, because their mind and skills don't always match the mind and skills of people they're advising. Does that make sense at all?
Yeah. Or if you could have Spielberg still producing and Joe Johnston directing, who has worked with Spielberg a whole heck of a lot, so they've got a very great shorthand together, those two. Again, you do that, put Brendan Fraser in this role, you might have a much more fun movie.
I'm all for that movie. This movie needed to be campy.
I want to say
so
this.
The next, I was going to get into one of my 10 commandments of this movie, but go ahead.
Well, I mean, basically, I just want to say that because you mentioned, Bruce, that like the Westerns and all that kind of stuff, and one of the things that I wish, I guess, in those meetings, if they took place, that Spielberg would have said to Favreau and crew, how about some close-ups? You ever seen a close-up? What's a close-up? Have you seen an extreme close-up? Because there's none of those in this film. There's so much wide-angle photography, which is great for vistas and all that other stuff. But if you look at Leone's stuff, he is in these characters' faces. You feel what these, the heat that's on them. You feel that, man, because that camera's right up in there. And you are making these guys who in other films look like fantastic giant superhero characters. They look like the real small life people that they actually are. Harrison Ford's not a big dude, and this movie shows him as not a big dude at all, but they don't play him as not a big dude. They play him as if he's 10 feet tall. And I think a lot of that has to do with just a lot of wide angle photography out this flick, and it kind of drove me nuts.
Okay, so here's the second biggest problem of this movie. The script to this movie is completely unimaginative, which sounds ridiculous when cowboys are fighting aliens. But there is nothing in this movie that is surprising. There is nothing where you're like, oh, that's a good turn. There's none of that in any way. Whether it's like somebody doing a really good job, like Paul Dano is great in this movie, but that is exactly what you think that character is going to be. And it's the exact same thing across the board for the entire movie, with everything, everywhere, and everyone in it. There isn't a single moment where you're like, "Oh wow, that's surprising. That surprises me."
I did have one
point.
I did have one moment of, I don't know if it's surprise or confusion. I did have one moment that caught me off guard, but I don't know if we're to that
What
yet.
is it?
It's when Olivia Wilde gets thrown into the fire and then turns into like a firebird, then steps out.
Well, doesn't she tell you she's an alien or something?
Not until later.
After that she tells you she's an alien.
Yeah, we figure it out later. But the thing is, too, at the same time, she hasn't had enough screen time at that point, and she's a famous enough person at the time, and they just don't get rid of the super good looking people like that real fast. They just go, oh, we need to keep them around because
Well, I thought it was going to be a fake out. Like she's wrapped up in a cloth when she gets thrown on the fire, and we just see her shoes. And I thought he was going to be sad over her being burned. Then she would come up with a bandage on her stomach and say, "Oh, that wasn't me. That was some other lady that I gave my shoes to." I thought it was going to be something like that, which actually I would have probably enjoyed more. And this movie, 2011, right?
That's correct.
So 2011, I can't hold 2019 sensibilities against it, but you don't have a lady walk out of a fire naked in a movie unless you just want people to say, "Oh, that's a Game of Thrones moment." But in 2011, that wasn't really a Game of Thrones moment yet, I guess.
Oh, so you mean Game of Thrones is doing some stealing? Somebody get them boys on the phone.
You know what? Start to finish, I kept thinking Game of Thrones is just like that movie I haven't seen, Cowboys and Aliens.
It's somewhere in there in your head going,
So the next problem, the next biggest problem in this movie is that Harrison Ford wants to be doing anything else than be in this movie.
He is sleepwalking. It is so sad.
He clearly doesn't want to be there. And reading some of the trivia about this movie, he didn't even want his character wearing a cowboy hat in this movie.
Yeah, I read that there was a whole lot of extended discussion about the hat.
Just absolutely ridiculous.
This is why you don't see him in Westerns, man.
One of the neat things about seeing him in The Force Awakens is that he kind of sort of wanted to be there. Like, it was nice to see because we hadn't seen it in like 20 years. But seeing this movie reminded me, oh, right, that's why we don't see him in anything anymore, because he's literally there to grab paychecks. Mm-hmm. And this movie here, there isn't a single scene I see him in where I'm like, you know what? Like, he's really great in this.
I think after you survive your fourth consecutive plane crash, you just show up and do whatever you want, and you dare people to tell you it's wrong.
Like, the only time where it comes close to him acting well is when, his surrogate son there is dying and everything. Like, he seems to care a tiny bit there, but that's about it. Most of it's pretty dry.
And I mean, from the performance that he gave us, if he doesn't want to wear a hat, you know what? So what? Have him not wear a hat. It's not like it would have made anything worse, in my opinion.
You're right. It wouldn't have changed a single thing. The amount of performance given, it does not matter in whether or not he's wearing a hat. I absolutely agree with you.
But it won't look on the poster.
Yeah, and you know what? I think maybe he would have had a little fun if it was campy and jokey too. You never know. Like getting him a chance to act silly. He may have given us a better performance.
He might have.
Because that's part of what I saw in The Force Awakens is he got to do make a couple of jokes here and there and stuff. And that's what worked well.
He did. And it's kind of unfair to bring this up because these guys are such good actors, but Paul Dano, Sam Rockwell, and Walton Goggins, they completely outshine anyone else in this movie. Mm-hmm. And like, so why is the barkeep the most interesting person in most scenes? Like the reason why is because he is well cast, because he's great.
And that's really what caught my attention more than the big stars, more than Daniel Craig and Harrison Ford, who obviously are top billed. But what got me excited was when I, saw Clancy Brown, I saw Coggins, I saw Sam Rockwell, who's never, ever disappointed me that I can think of, even in really bad movies.
Bruce, imagine this. Imagine how much better this movie is if Sam Rockwell is playing the Daniel Craig character.
Think how much better it is if he's playing the alien, for heaven's sake. Like, man, there's plenty of room for improvement here. But yes, I agree with you.
He doesn't have much of a role.
Brown is the Harrison Ford character. Get out of here.
Yeah,
I would even go so far as to say Keith Carradine is the Harrison
Ford.
That
was going to be my next thing. I think Keith Carradine was fantastic in this movie, and he's only in it for like 8 minutes, maybe.
And then let Harrison Ford be the Indian chief.
But look, it might as well at this point. But I did I don't know if this is specific or not, but Keith Carradine is the sheriff of the town, and the sheriff's name is Taggart, which was also the sheriff, which was also the sheriffs in Blazing Saddles.
Right.
So that's like I don't know
didn't even catch that.
I don't know if that's a kick, but I'd like to think that it is.
That might be why he had that line where he said, "What in the wide, wide world of sports is going on out here?" When the
Tell
aliens
him
first
I
attacked?
said ow. Got it.
I did have the director's cut, by the way. You guys might not have seen that.
I had the option, and I'm like, I'll bet you theatrical shorter.
Yeah, I should have checked the run. Actually, I didn't know I had the option. Just when it started playing, it said extra footage has been added to this version of the film.
And it had in parentheses, you poor jerk.
But yeah, it's that depth in the cast that really got me excited. But then not only is it not campy, not leaning into the high concept, not having fun, not enough action. Like there's not enough cowboy action or enough alien action, if you ask me.
Mm-hmm.
But then on top of that, they add some unnecessary complications. Like the comic story's pretty straight story about some cowboys that are on their way to do a job. They get attacked by aliens. They have to team up with their historical adversaries, the Apache, in order to fight back against the aliens. I mean, that's a solid story as old as time itself. You get the bigger bad that makes your former enemies have to be your allies. That works well. That's a solid story. But then they go in and they add things like needless amnesia. There's no, there's no amnesia element in the comic book story. But for some reason, I guess they think it's more interesting if Daniel Craig has like a Jason Bourne type of experience rediscovering his backstory.
There's a little bit of that, and there's obviously a little man with no name thing going on. So yeah, it's wildly unnecessary.
I did like how he discovered his name from a wanted poster.
I would be a little bit more upset with how I was drawn in that picture. It's like, that's what you think of me? Ugh. From that angle? No, thank you.
Yeah. And, Harrison Ford could have been more of a bad guy, I think. They could have done something with him. I mean, not just as Harrison Ford's performance, not that great, but that character, I don't think I would even care if the performance was great if it weren't like a name that you know so well, because that character is not hugely significant, really.
He doesn't really do a lot. There's not a lot of agency to him, and I don't know what he wants. The entire movie, I'm not 100% sure what he wants.
So here's the next problem with the movie is that you have Kurtzman and Orsi and Lindelof. All three of those guys on their own can write a better movie than the one that we're seeing here. And you have these aliens. Like let's put the human being part aside because we'll get to that later. You have these aliens who can't speak. You don't know where they're from. You don't know their history. You don't know anything about these things. And yet they're not a force of nature. That's the only way you're going to make this work. Yeah. Is that if you are going to have cowboys versus these aliens, since they can't speak, since you don't know what their motives are, since you know nothing about them and will never know nothing about them, the only thing you can do is basically make them Jaws. That's basically the only thing you can do to make them interesting. But no, instead, let's make them almost the aliens from Aliens, except for instead of the really cool thing where the head comes out of the head, now we're going to have hands come out of the chest, which is so stupid.
I kind of like that in a weird way. It's not super great, but like I kind of picture these creatures kind of like Daleks, but with instead of metal bodies, you had like an organic body that the little creature was in. That's kind of how I saw it. I don't know if, and that's how I think the other one, when the kid towards the end stabs the thing and everything, like, oh, the shell's off, so it's much more.
Adam, do you think for a second, do you feel danger whenever the aliens are around?
Only in like that, like the first time that, well, not a ton, but the only time that it felt like a little danger was when kind of the hands were coming at them, like the first time.
I think they gave us the least interesting version of an alien. It's got the least interesting part. Like they tried so hard. Somebody somewhere tried so hard to think like, let's make this look organic and real and believable. And what they wound up giving us was like a hairless gorilla or something. I mean, I found it absolutely uninteresting. They even try to tease us a little bit before we get to see it. Then when we do get to see it, it's nothing but disappointment. They had mentioned as a source of inspiration the aliens from District 9 on a much, much lower budget. They gave us much better looking aliens in District 9. Is it called compositing, where you put in the post and try to make the digital image fit in with what they filmed?
Yeah,
is that
part of it? Yeah.
Yeah. I thought that was even like sci-fi level bad sometimes. Like there's one scene where an alien's falling down a shaft or whatever, and it just like you can see the outline. I mean, it looks like sci-fi TV movie bad at some points for a movie with a budget as big as this one was. I was really disappointed all the way around with the Aliens. And, you know, if you're watching it for the Cowboys, that's cool. But, you know, I think a lot of people are watching it for the Aliens, and they really dropped the ball there.
Well, I prefer the cowboy elements to the alien elements in this movie. But here's the thing is that when you're first watching the movie, it's a cowboy movie. And that cowboy movie isn't great. It's a paint by numbers. It's something that probably, you know, like your grandpa watched, like that kind of cowboy movie, which is fine. It's totally fine. But it's not interesting. It's set up for what you hope becomes something interesting. And instead of having a paint by numbers cowboy movie, it turns into a unrealistic, unfun, weightless alien movie. Because that's the other part to all of the CG in this movie, is that it's that Star Wars prequel problem where nothing has any weight to it. Like everything feels like nothing when you're watching it. That's a problem. And there's not characters to get behind because you don't care in the first place.
And I feel like it was filmed in a way that they wanted it to be the experience that you came expecting to see one thing and then you saw something else. Like it was filmed in a way that they almost made me think that in someone's mind, you're experiencing the story as you're expecting to see a Western with Harrison Ford and Daniel Craig. And when aliens show up, you're just totally dropping your jaw. But the title is Cowboys and Aliens, so you can't film it that way.
That's true.
You know what I mean? If it were called like High Plains Invaders, like the sci-fi movie that came out 2 years before this, and you think, oh, some kind of maybe it's a Native American tribe is going to invade on the plains, and when the aliens show up and James Marsters is in a panic, well, you're convinced. But here, not as good as the movie from 2 years before.
Shame. I was not aware that was a thing.
Oh yeah, it's pretty fun. It's fun because it knows it's bad. And it just gives you what it can. This movie, I don't know. This movie's really thinking you're going to get a Robert Ford and James Cameron mashup or something. They even had that contrived scene with the upside down riverboat where it's all dark inside to try to make it feel like the what's the name of the ship in the first Alien movie, Adam? I want to call it the Nosferatu.
The Nostromo.
Yeah, that's it. They want to kind of give it that alien feel, you know, when they're in that upside down riverboat, but it's just not working for me. They're trying to build tension when I've already given up on caring.
Straight garbage. Straight garbage. And Olivia Wilde, let me throw my 2 bits in here about her. She's a good looking lady. Mm-hmm. Maybe not an actress.
She's an all right director.
I have never believed anything that has ever come out of that woman's mouth.
Yeah.
Well, as far as like my experience with Olivia Wilde's work, the thing I'm a biggest fan of, I just saw recently, is Booksmart. So as a director, maybe she's got something.
Oh, is she the director of Booksmart?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's her that's her directorial debut, and it's a really good film. So
good for her.
Maybe she's got a whole career waiting as a director. But as far as acting, you know, it's terrible to go through life the way I do, but sometimes I'll make up my mind without giving people a chance. And like, if you were part of the cast of House, you got like 2 strikes against you for some reason. So, you know, I never really was willing to give her a real good chance as an actress, but I like her as a director.
Very good.
Not a House guy, Bruce is bringing it on. We're going to get emails.
Hey, Stephen Fry, I like better than Hugh Laurie.
But let's see. No, she's there, and like we never get to see like the original alien form or anything that she's like, oh, I'm an alien. I didn't need to tell you about that earlier, but yeah, I'm totally alien, and she just stays a person the rest of the time. That's it. No,
yeah, and I don't feel like we even got a whole lot of a interesting backstory on what her goal or her mission was. She's like, I'm an alien. I'm here to stop him.
Yeah.
Like that would fit if this were a campy movie. But in this movie, you know, we got to know more about her.
So now, one of the things that we kind of figure out eventually that the aliens are there for is that they've got this big giant thing and they're harvesting gold and stuff like that. But my question
Yeah.
is, do we know why they're harvesting the gold?
Oh,
No.
she says it's just as rare there as it is here.
Oh, well, golly, so they can go into the alien pawn shop and get a little bit of extra bread.
They're
Yeah.
intergalactic Hans Grubers.
The thing is, if gold is really their ultimate goal, they probably could have gotten it easier than going through everything they went through.
How many light years did you travel for this gold? And I'm sorry, if you traveled that far, I mean, as valuable as gold is, I don't think most of us are leaving the atmosphere for it.
Hey, speak for yourself.
Bruce is like, sign me up to that gold expedition, will you?
I'm
Gold in
going to
space.
Venus. I'm a Venus gold farmer.
Oh, I always love the people that are just like, no, you don't want to go to Venus. It's like super stormy and stuff, and you won't like it. It's gonna be too hot, and it's not real. It's like, shut up. Just let me have my
Venus
Venus
gold
fun.
farmer is my new pen name.
That sounds like a different kind of name, but I'll leave that alone. But yeah, again, I think this movie, the problem is that there's all of these great elements. Like I said, we've got an outstanding cast. We've got a guy who's a pretty solid director. Writers that can, like Sean said, in their own rights can do fine. But sometimes when you put them together, that Voltron comes out looking a little bit. I just don't understand how they thought that this thing was like $140-something million and only made like 160 or something worldwide. So
I think what I read was
this is a
163 budget versus 174 box office.
Yeah, that's even worse. That's just garbage money, man. And who put this out again? Universal? Yeah.
Universal DreamWorks.
Yeah, Universal, that was part of their kind of rough years before they really kind of got it together. Whenever Straight Outta Compton came out, that's when they all of a sudden Universal was like, "Oh, look, we know what we're doing again."
I'm surprised there's not a Cowboys and Aliens ride at Universal Studios because, man, they don't care if a movie was terribly successful or not. They'll put a ride out.
They will. One of the cool things about this movie is that there's actual Apache Native Americans in it.
Mm-hmm.
That part's cool. And the second part that's super cool is that Apache actors, like Indian actors, or Native American actors, have the best names ever, like David Midthunder and Rex Rideout.
I wonder if David Midthunder is related to Amber Midthunder from Legion.
Maybe. And of course, my favorite, Freddie Apache.
Now that's the name, man. And Adam Beach.
His daughter is Amber Midthunder. There you go.
Oh, really?
Yep.
There you go, right there. I see a picture of them together.
There you go.
Dang.
You run into the Johnsons, the Leslies, and the Midthunders. You don't forget the Midthunder family.
Man, how great is that?
It's just too cool. Just growing up and somebody in your school's name is like Shark Fighter, and you're like, what?
What?
That's a thing?
So cool.
I wish it would be. Like I said, I don't know what else can we say about this movie, because I think that's one of the sins is that nothing happens past the first act.
If I may,
please.
The worst movies made are not the ones that are insane.
I've been saying this.
Oh, have you now? You're lucky we can't curse on this show.
Yeah, well.
But this is the worst kind of movie that gets made. This is it. It doesn't get worse than this. This is a movie that you literally forget seconds after you are done watching it. It literally is that way. It's that poorly done. And it's the kind of poorly done where really good people. This is a movie that have you guys ever heard the podcast Blank Check?
I've heard of it, have not listened.
It's great. They have this term for a movie like this. It's called they go, "Oh, that movie doesn't exist." Like whenever there's a movie that you just completely forget about, you don't even remember them making this movie. Yeah. That's what this movie is. It's a movie that doesn't exist because no one who is even involved in the making of it remembers being on it, probably.
Yeah, it's definitely one that you'll like, if it was on Netflix at some point in the future, you'll scroll through and go, oh, yeah, that was a thing. I forgot that
right,
was a
I did
thing.
see this movie.
Then you'll do like I did and get through that first act and be like, okay, everything's boring now.
Man, see, the thing is, too, is that I will fall asleep at a movie that's good. So at a movie that is not good, you stand no chance.
I got a question. I don't know.
I think I had my volume turned all the way down. I was wondering why you guys weren't acknowledging my comments. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
I had to switch channels on the mixer and didn't realize I switched.
I like to
one
see
with
him.
the
I like to
volume
picture him
all the way
having
down.
a hissy fit, just shaking his hands, Homer Simpson style, going, "Let me talk, you guys."
It's like those gentlemen aren't normally that rude when I speak. I was going to say the biggest sin of this movie is that it's called Cowboys and Aliens. It has stars you recognize, and it is absolutely boring. Just to build on what you said, you could just fill this movie with explosions. You could have a lot of cheesy one-liners. I mean, you could make this. I'm trying to think of you could make this like not even as good as The Mummy, but you could make this like Jonah Hex level and be better than this is, maybe, because at least Jonah Hex is only 80 minutes. You take this movie and you compress it to 90 minutes, it's a better movie.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I think honestly, that's not a bad plan. If you did get this down to 90 minutes, it would at least flow a little bit better. Nothing interesting would happen in it, mind you, but it would still flow a little bit better.
But I just kind of feel crushed because you got 1999 Wild Wild West, you got Jonah Hex, you got this movie, all movies that did not perform well at the box office for reasons that I would say they didn't deserve to perform well at the box office. But because of that, I don't know that anybody's going to be very eager at all to make a weird Western anytime soon. But the good side is if they do make one, it's going to have a low budget, and that's probably going to make it more fun.
And you get some insane things like Bone Tomahawk.
Yep.
Yeah.
So,
which is pretty cool.
There you go.
Yep.
Like that's
and
what you need.
Huge chances.
Something that's just a little bit off the beaten path, because that's one that if you just go, oh, Bone Tomahawk, I don't know what this is. You walk in and you're like, what was that? That was not what I was thinking.
You know what movie this reminds me of most? Do you guys remember the movie Battle for Los Angeles?
Ooh, vaguely.
Battle for Los Angeles. No, I remember the title. I have no recollection of the movie.
There's a reason for it. It's because there is nothing to recommend it very much like this movie. That movie is loud. It is, it's a genre movie, but it is straight forgettable garbage. And that's exactly what this movie is. Same exact thing.
Maybe something. Yeah, you're right. It's the worst sin a movie can have is boring.
Yeah.
You say that a lot, Sean. But man,
other people say it too.
Battle of Los Angeles, and I found the Great Los Angeles Air Raid of 1942. So I didn't work out. That didn't work out.
But it's weird because, I mean, Favreau, I don't know, he's had a very interesting career. I mean, it's like starting out kind of doing writing and then a bit of acting and, getting into the directing and stuff. And his directing stuff is kind of all over the place. I mean, you've got, your Iron Mans, you've got this, and then, he's getting into, the Disney animated stuff with the Lion King and, Jungle Book and everything. And that Lion King movie, by the way, is about to make as much money as Dark Knight made. Put that in your noggin and jostle it around for a while. That's some crazy thoughts.
That's because it's family friendly and it isn't straight garbage.
They know what it is.
As long as you make something that isn't straight up garbage, it's going to make a ton of money. Family movie.
And
it's going to do well at an international market too because the animals, aren't human. So you put the voices in, it's not weird. Yeah.
Yep.
Put that on a shirt. Animals are not humans. Good job, Bruce. Deep stuff.
But humans are animals.
Is that Mitch Hedberg joke?
Oh, yeah. Do you feel like a human?
I didn't know there was going to be a second part. Otherwise, I would have not said anything.
Man, I miss Mitch Hedberg.
Me too.
Well, you know what Mitch Hedberg would have loved? Figuring out how every single comic book movie on planet Earth connects one-to-one with Sylvester Stallone. They say it can't be done. I say, what say you, Sean Kovacs?
Thank you, Adam. I have a prepared statement. Heroes come in many forms. On Hero Movie Podcast, we usually speak about the kind who wear capes, but heroes can take on many different versions. Like the selfless hero on the internet that corrects your grammar. Or the brave hero that calls you an SJW whenever you ask why a white guy is playing a traditional Asian role. Or the woman who, whenever you have anything negative to say anywhere ever about any woman ever, heroically brings up your issues of toxic masculinity. You know, real heroes. But today I'd like to talk about a group of heroes who don't get brought up often enough on HMP, the Teamsters. The Teamsters, an organization that formed in 1903 by the merger of the Team Drivers International Union and the Teamsters National Union. And for the last 116 years, they've been what all Americans strive to be. Hardworking, not mob-related, a system of meritocracy intelligence instead of being hired because you're the nephew of the Teamsters captain who got kicked out of UPS for calling a fellow female driver the word that you should never call a woman anywhere ever. You know, real heroes. This group of hardworking, helpful, and just downright gregarious group of people definitely aren't lecherous scumbags who overeat and destroy bathrooms, carving a path of foul-smelling devastation wherever you may find them. They're also one of the strongest unions in the country, boasting approximately 1.3 million members in a 2013 report. And in a completely selfless act, most Teamsters vote for anti-union President Donald Trump. So completely selfless. Most people would ask, why would Teamsters vote against their own interests? But not me. I know it's because they're heroes and not morons who don't even see what will happen to their own lives if their union gets disbanded. They're all just handsome guy, next door, chiseled featured heroes. Amongst these heroes stands Jimmy Kamansky, a Teamster since 1995. Jimmy has worked on some of Hollywood's biggest pictures like The Whole 10 Yards and Rush Hour 3 and the RoboCop remake that everyone loves so much. He was the production driver on Cowboys and Aliens, and he's credited as driver on The Expendables, starring a man who twice played a Teamster in movies, Sylvester Stallone. Why hasn't Jimmy Kamansky worked with Stallone again? Maybe it's because Jimmy has 7 children. Look it up, he does. Woo. And he needed to take care of them. Maybe it's because he was doing something heroic like all Teamsters, and he was saving the disenfranchised from tyranny in his free time. Or maybe it's because Jimmy holds his movie stars to a higher standard, and Sylvester Stallone just didn't pass the muster. I hope that word isn't mustard. I never know, and I'm not willing to look it up. Look, the truth of the matter is I don't know Jimmy Kamansky. I've never met him. I've never met one of his 7 children. But if I ever meet him, I'll be best friends with the man because, as everyone knows, Teamsters are nice, easygoing heroes who often have 7 children. 7 children! And there you have it, HMPers. This week's Stallone connection is hard-driving hero Jimmy Kamansky. I'm Sean Kovacs, and one day I hope I can become a Teamster. Thank you. I'm not serious. Thank you.
Where does Jimmy find all the time? Because, you know, I can't see where he would, you know, have enough time to break in all that love in there because, you know, the Teamsters, they stay busy, you know?
They do. They do.
So I don't quite get it, but, you know, hey, there's always a white tiger in every bunch. That's not a saying.
How great is that name, though? Jimmy Kamansky.
That's pretty good. It's pretty good. If he went into Teamster, he's definitely going to be some sort of detective. But you know,
I don't know if either of you guys have read Nerdspawn Genesis, but both Lil Steele and Dick Gunfighter get to beat up Teamsters in that novel.
Every American boy's dream. Well,
I don't remember.
Well, our American dream has to do with the Robin rating system. That's where we rate our films, not on a letter or number. That's just silly. We got our own silly crap. The Robin rating system. Check it out at facebook.com/HearMoviePodcast. It's right there at the top of the screen. Bruce, where does Cowboys Aliens fall on the Robin rating system for you?
You know, it failed to lean into the camp. I think somebody was trying to subvert expectations. They think you're going to see the title, expect something campy, and they're going to blow you away with this cinematography or something. I don't know. This is the kind of movie you sleep through. The kind of movie that you sleep through. Like I would compare this to like golf on a Saturday afternoon back before I had things like the internet. You know, golf was the only thing on Saturday afternoon. It was great to turn it on and fall asleep on the couch. This is like that. So I'm going to give it Stephanie Brown, because Stephanie Brown I give to the movies that I sleep through. Jason Todd I give to the ones that have me stewing in my classic impotent rage as I watch them. So I'm going to just say Stephanie Brown. I don't care enough to hate this movie because, you know, how bad can it be if it helps you go to sleep?
It's like NyQuil. Sean?
I am invoking the very rarely used Chris O'Donnell.
Strong.
Chris O'Donnell as Jason Todd. This is the worst kind of movie. I'm at a loss for words, and I hate when I'm listening to a podcast where someone is fake raging out, you know, and they're pretending that they're really loud, like they're being loud, when actually they're talking at almost a whisper when they're talking. Anyway,
like it
that's my own cross to bear. This is a Chris O'Donnell as Jason Todd. Screw this movie. Let's never, ever talk about this movie again because there'll be no reason to bring it up.
I can't believe that Matthew Labatique is the guy who was a cinematographer on this. I was just like, who did this?
Great,
like, and he, again,
wow.
Talented.
Involved in this movie.
Oscar winner, that guy. It's unbelievable. I'm going with Chris with Bruce. I don't know why. Where did Chris come from? I'm going with Bruce. This is Stephanie.
Chris Elvins. That's where it came
Chris
from.
Elvins. Yeah, he's always on my mind, that guy. My favorite Canadian.
Elvins.
Nothing but Elvins. All right. But no, for me, this is Stephanie Brown. It's not there. I guess the enough elements in there that are pretty good to make something that's kind of crappy, almost stomachable. But it's just like Bruce said. If you need to fall asleep on a Sunday, this is the way to do it. You could find a lot worse, and golf's not on television all year round. So pop in Cowboys and Aliens.
You could find a lot worse
for sleeping. For
sleeping wise. Yeah. You don't want Ron Popeil screaming in your ear while you're trying to sleep. No, thank you. I mean, that and you're going to be heading towards the telephone to place an order. Duh.
What was the name of that preacher guy who was on really late night? He was old and like had gray hair, and he would just be sitting down in a chair just yelling at you. What was that guy's name? Do you remember?
Oh, I wish I could, man. That sounds like something I'd be into.
But do you know what I'm talking about?
I don't.
It's basically in the 80s. Like they would cut away from time to time of him like on his farm and like riding a horse and stuff. Like, it's so weird. I got to figure out who that guy is.
Man, the 80s when you could spend an hour on Sunday morning watching some guy fish.
Yeah.
Like, not even catching stuff, just standing there holding his rod.
Yeah.
Billy dance.
Here's Earl and Greg out fishing again. Well, that's the show, everybody. Hope you enjoyed it. Brought to you by Bounty, the quicker picker-upper. And then they just go to commercial, and that's it. I don't understand it. Well, that's it, everybody. It's so to skip Cowboys and Aliens. I don't think there's any real reason to run out to your local multiplex. No one's playing it in multiplex. That doesn't
Definitely
make any sense.
not.
But next week we decided that we might try to do a little bit something different. So we're going to be looking at a Wonder Woman from 1971, was it?
1974, starring Kathy Lee Crosby.
So none of our no favorite Linda Hamilton or Linda Carter rather in this. That's sad, but
nope.
But we'll see about it, man. We'll see if Linda Carter was the right direction to go.
I mean, look, man. Everybody knows the take if you're watching the Linda Carter Wonder Woman, and it's just like, oh man, Wonder Woman's so hot. I mean, that's all you can talk about when you're watching that.
It's like this.
Yeah,
was
but
done with.
now we get to see one of the hosts of That's Incredible as
That's
a superhero.
right. That's right.
And I'm sure that's what we'll be saying after the credits roll. That's incredible.
Dr. Gene Scott.
Or maybe not.
Dr. Gene Scott is his name.
No.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Thank
Yeah.
you.
He was the preacher. He was the preacher in the 80s who was always on TV. Yeah.
Oh, I
Sorry,
haven't
sorry,
seen that
keep
guy. All right,
going.
a little bit out of my things. Okay, so in the meantime, Bruce, where might we find more of your work on the internet?
Oh boy, I better talk fast because I'm now on the 3rd channel on my mixer this episode. I might have to get a new mix before tomorrow.
Ooh.
Oh, no.
I'm going to cede my time to a movie that's coming out on September 20th that I think our listeners should all pack up and go see. It's not a superhero movie, but I want it to do well at the box office. It's going up against the stiff competition that is Downton Abbey. But I want people to go see Rambo Last Blood, September 20th. So, folks, just be aware, Rambo Last Blood, wide release on September 20th.
Yeah, it's a tough one, man, because that's coming out. Ad Astra, which looks like another great, smart sci-fi movie, which
man,
we
that
need
looks
more
good.
of. I'm all down with that, too. So, yeah, that's going to be a busy weekend, September 20th. Sean?
You can reach me at Sean Kovacs 4 on Twitter. I'm on there every day. And you can also find me at Preacher Podcast, which we are doing another one tomorrow, yeah?
Yeah. Oh, and
Oh,
by the
yeah.
way, please follow Sean.
If the mixer's still working.
Yes, if the mixer still works. But do follow Sean on Twitter. You are auctioning off some amazing, amazing artifacts there that, frankly, I don't think you can find many place else. So do check out Sean's.
Yeah, Richard Scarry books, Little People puzzles. There's a lot going on over there.
There's a double Pop-O-Matic Trouble that you had going. That was like,
It's
what?
true.
They made it with
It's
2?
true.
Why on earth would you do that? Find out over at Sean Kovacs Internet or a Twitter handle there, everybody.
Thank you, sir.
And, of course, we got a new show that's coming out not too awful long. Maybe we'll announce that full next week. But there's more stuff coming from the gang that you know and love, everybody. So, tune in then. Until next week, for Sean Kovacs, Bruce Leslie, I'm Adam Portrais. Stay super, everybody.
Bye, Marty and Ave.
Cowboys ain't easy to love, they're harder to hold. They'd rather give you a song than diamonds or gold. Don't star belt buckles and old faded Levi's, and each night begins a new day. If you don't understand him and he don't die young, he'll probably just ride away. Mamas, don't let your babies grow up to be cowboys. Don't let them pick guitars and drive them old trucks. Let them be doctors and lawyers and such. Mamas, don't let your babies grow up to be cowboys. They'll never stay home, and they're always alone, even with someone they love. Cowboys like smoky old blue rooms and clear mountain mornings, little warm puppies and children and girls all tonight. Them that don't know him won't like him, and them that do sometimes won't know how to take him. He ain't wrong, he's just different, but his pride won't let him do things to make you think he's right. Mamas, don't let your babies grow up to be cowboys. Don't let them pick guitars and drive them old trucks. Let them be doctors and lawyers and such. Mamas, don't let your babies grow up to be cowboys. on their own.